What's up, everybody? You are now 15 weeks out to Ironman Santa Rosa. And it seems as the weeks click by, people start to get a little bit more anxious, nervous, but still 15 weeks out. We got a long way to go. So don't worry about it. Just keep plugging away. Welcome to episode 3 in our lead up into Ironman Santa Rosa. We're going to go every week here. And maybe as we get close, do some special topic stuff. I've been working out a little bit of equipment ideas. I'm going to pull in an outside microphone, work on some sound quality, maybe do an external camera, work on quality, and then we'll spice it up with some. We'll get some guests and talk about some different concepts here for Ironman Santa Rosa as we move forward. But just like we've done the first 2 episodes, I'm going to go 3 topics plus questions that have come in the last week or 2. So we're going to talk logistics, course, something course related, and we will talk about training a little bit and a new little piece I'll throw in today. But and then we'll answer questions at the end. And if anyone happens to watch live, you can pop your questions up. And although it's tough to do this and not have somebody here with me to read the questions, but anyway, I'm going to do that towards the end, answer questions from last week. And then again, like I've said before, if you have questions, when this goes to the Facebook page, pop it up. Any questions on any of those feeds, drop them in, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I get notifications if there's questions there. So we'll keep this going, and I'm sure questions will come in a little bit more. Thanks for the people that have viewed. I'm getting a bunch of viewers in so far. Pretty good. Share it and let other people know this is available in these little bite-sized pieces as we lead into the race. So let's start with logistics question to start, a logistics thing. And this is going to be more about pre-race, and I want to talk a little bit now about it, but once we get final bike course, and I've talked about that a couple of times, final bike course plugged in, we'll be able to talk logistics of training in Sonoma County a little bit more. So one thing to remember is the weather is really variable right now here. Like tomorrow morning, trying to plan a bike ride with our training group, and it's been sucked in with fog in the morning, and it's wet and it's cold. It's not safe. So it's really interesting. You can be in, say, San Francisco, 50 miles from here, and it could be sunny. And here it could be foggy because of the valleys and the way it gets sucked in. And it's a lot colder here. We're 32 degrees this morning with wet fog, which can also make some even colder areas icy. So be careful if you do come up. And we'll get you some better logistics as the bike course comes open. But I do just remember that it's the 2 transition areas are 30 plus miles apart, so it makes for the logistics of getting exact course details right. So my logistical suggestion now is be patient, wait to come up and train when we get the bike course dialed in, and we can get you a better logistics of how to go about and do it. It's easy enough to come up and run on the run course. It's straightforward. You just would park in downtown, and it's a reasonably benign run course as far as that goes. So I think the bigger logistics come with T1, which I'm going to talk about on the course stuff. And then once the bike course gets unveiled, because it's going to be dynamic no matter what, with all the rollers and some of the hills and the dynamics of the terrain here, that will be a big feature. So that's my logistics. My suggestion is be patient, wait to come up and train if you're in the region to come up and train. And the other thing too is if you are interested in that and you have a small group. I did this for a group last year. We customed a training day so that we can try and transport you to the lake, get you around, eliminate a whole bunch of the logistical questions you might have. So sort of a custom camp if you want to do it. So reach out if you have any questions on that. And I can work with you on that project for you or your group or your team, or depending on size, we can work on that. So let me know. All right, so let's move on. Course. Last week we talked about the swim. Talked about how the swim would be, if it would be sun impacted, the directional of the swim, 2 loops, getting out of the water. And I referenced T1, and the T1 is going to be long. So today for the course, I want to talk about transition 1, okay, into the beginning of the bike ride, because we know what the beginning of the bike ride is going to look like regardless of how the new bike course gets tailored. So when you leave the water, you have a reasonable steep uphill grade up to the actual transition area. It's up a long boat ramp, and it's going to be a quarter of a mile from when you actually start the run up to you actually enter the transition area. So a quarter mile, so about 400 meters, with the majority of it uphill. Some of it is steep. It will be padded. It will be carpeted. They did a really nice job last year after the feedback from the first event to get it sorted out that way, and it was much different. So you don't need shoes. We actually recommended last year to not even leave shoes down there after the second race because they had that padding issue sorted out. So padded all the way up, but it will be steep. So logistically or strategically for some of you, walking will be a really good option. Walking up the steep part, and then it actually does level out as you go underneath the bridge, which you'll actually ride over leaving T1, and then it pops up steep again. So however you decide to control your heart rate or control your effort or your output going up there is an individual thing, but just realize that it's steep and it's reasonably long. You can go back and look at some of the transitions and how long it took people, even athletes, even the pros, their transition time doubled than what they might be on a normal course. So transition area 1, and the area itself is big. We're going to service a lot of athletes. We're talking probably over 2,500 starters in the race, which means we're a big transition area, so it means more ground to cover. When you do go up, that some of that transition area, the pavement is a little coarse, so decide how you're going to want to handle that in terms of your footwear and getting out of T1. So exit T1. When you exit T1, people made this mistake last year. They're thinking they're going straight downhill to start the bike, which we're not. When you leave T1, the actual area itself, the fenced-in area, where you mount, you're going to have a little gradual uphill till you turn right out of the parking lot and cross the bridge. So be aware that it's an uphill there, and strategize for that. You will cross the bridge, which you'll have an uphill to a slight downhill, and then you actually, before descending down into the valley, you'll have a short hill. We can talk strategically much later on how to pace your race, but be aware of this. So you'll have a small hill. It probably takes 60 seconds for a lot of people to get up that hill. And then you start a 2-mile descent and a fast descent into the Alexander Valley. The Dry Creek Valley. So the other thing too is last year at the race, you were descending in the left lane. So we call, or what Ironman calls, a contraflow lane, descending downhill. And there were some aero bar restrictions in that downhill because it's fast. Okay. So it's 2 miles descending downhill, reasonably fast, sweepy corners, good pavement until you cross a bridge to make a hard right hand turn, leaving the Lake Sonoma area onto what we call Dry Creek Road. And then from Dry Creek Road up to Dutcher Creek Road, where you'll make your left-hand turn, is for the most part flat to gradually downhill. It's got a couple of small rollers in it, but it's pretty quick. So it's a really quick first part of the bike ride. So that's the course part that I want to talk about, but I want to tie into it, which could be really important in May more than it will be in July. So, our average, we'll talk average weather that time of year. Average highs are only going to be 73, 74, 75 degrees, depending where you are in the county. So in Santa Rosa, average high is 74. Average low is 48 degrees. If we don't have sunshine, if we have marine layer or cloud cover, it would normally be marine layer. We could be looking at 48 to 50 degrees when you start the race, and getting out of the water, you're going to be wet. And then you're going to proceed to be going wet downhill at a high rate of speed with cool temperatures. So that's a pretty important component, especially it'll be at a slow warm up as the day goes. So start to consider that. We're a long ways out, but start to consider that as far as what you're going to wear when you get out of the water and you get on the bike. unless it's a really hot day, which it can get, but more than likely we're in the 70s, which is going to be great racing weather. But it could be a cold morning. If it's clear, it might be colder than that. So it could be lower mid 40s. So be prepared for whatever you think you need to do. And the big part is dealing with that first 5 miles of the bike and not being really, really cold for a long period of time on the bike because you couldn't get warm after the descent. So take that into consideration as far as T1, the beginning of the bike course, and how the weather and the temperatures are going to impact the beginning of the bike course. All right. So again, when we get full bike course, we'll get into that a little bit more. But that's your opening part of the course, and we'll break it down more when you get a chance. Since we're talking weather, typically that time of year, very typical, is if we have wind in the morning, it will be trending out of the northwest in May. Okay, different in July, and we'll get to that when we talk 70.3, how those winds can change. But the race will be more wind impacted the longer the race is, so for the Ironman race as opposed to the 70.3. All right, so let's move on to, we got logistics, we got course, let's move on to training. And here's what I want to sort of throw out every 3 weeks just to give you an idea of where check in to see where you are. So we'll call it, where are you now? Okay, where are you now in your training? And the reality is you're going to be wherever you are. And I've had athletes ask me, reaching out individually through different channels, saying, where should we be? Okay, and I can give you a general. Again, we'll go back to when I'll further this. We'll say that sort of novice athlete, maybe intermediate to novice type athlete, which may be similar to a beginning athlete. Advanced athletes are going to be, should be in a little different situation. It could be more, it could be less. They might have more intensity. But in general, if we talk long workouts, if you're comfortable riding 3 to 3.5 hours right now at just a comfortable, easy, moderate level with some terrain change, not a ton of climbing. If you can manage that right now and be comfortable with that, you're in a good spot. Don't overdo it. I see athletes doing, rides that are too long, too early in the year. It's a really common thing in warm weather areas. So if you can do that, that's fine. Some of you are locked to indoor type training because of weather. So maybe your rides are a little shorter and they're broken up and they have a little bit more structure to them as opposed to just sitting on a trainer and just watching a movie and spinning away. You'd be better off doing a shorter ride with some structure and some intervals as opposed to just grinding away and soft pedaling through a movie. So a lot of people out there now are using Swift, which is great. You can ride the terrain, gauge it with your heart rate or your power or your perceived exertion. But again, ballpark 3.5 hours. If you're comfortable there, you're sort of in a non-issue issue place. If you're not comfortable with that, you just take your time and gradually get there. I have an athlete that I'm working with that's a little bit behind that curve, and we'll get him there, and I'm not worried about that. Long run. If you do that, if you're in, 90 minutes to 100 minutes, and you're comfortable with that as an easy to low moderate run, if you're just comfortable getting through that time frame, you're in a good position. Just want to make it repeatable, that you can do it, and you structure it different. And then we talk other types of workouts. This is a time of training, a time in training for you, getting ready for Ironman, that we want some dynamics to the training. You don't want it to be all specifically at whatever your Ironman heart rate, power, pace ranges. You don't want to do that right now. You want to be over it. You want to be under it. Yeah, we spend some time at it because it's just natural to do that. But create some variety, create some terrain changes, whether it be through hilly type runs or hill repeats if your coach or your plan calls for that, to create some dynamics to it. And then as we get closer to race day, then the work starts to be a lot more specific to the race intensity, but also the race terrain. So right now, less specific. We're still far enough out. You don't need to be too worried about it. And then as we start to get closer, make it more specific. So, and then as far as swimming goes, if you look at a workout and you have a workout that your coach or the plan calls for 3,000 meters and you're like, no problem, I can knock that out, that's probably a good spot. If you're comfortable at 3,000 meters, maybe even 3 workouts of 3,000 meters a week, or 2 at 3,000 and then 1 a little less, you're in good shape. You have plenty of time to build that up and build some durability. And if you're not with any of these, just take your time and build up. Don't jump through the process just to get to a point where someone says you should be or where I think you should be. These are just good ballpark. So some of you may look at this and just say, oh, I can back off a little bit. I don't need to do this much. So be leery of that. So last thing I want to transition into is some questions, okay? And some of that training concept came from questions that I'd had. So a couple questions I have, they're relative to the run course, but they're relative to things that you might want to think and start planning long term. First question I had is relative to lighting on the run course, and do I need a headlamp? If you feel like the majority of your run is going to be in the dark, or the last 2 of the 3 laps are going to be in the dark, I would strongly consider a headlamp. You're going to have plenty of stuff in the city of Santa Rosa that will be well lit. Some areas on the trail that you'll be running on will be well lit, but there are going to be some dark sections of trail that just aren't possible to get light towers, etc., onto them. So my recommendation is, if you're going to be out there past, say, 8 o'clock, 8:15, after that time frame, I would make sure you have a headlamp with you. Carry it with you from the start, or put it in your special needs bag so you can pick it up after a lap. But it was a really good question. So it's something you can plan, and even maybe train a little bit in the dark so you get used to seeing what it's like with a headlamp. But the course and the trail that you're on is pretty even and pretty smooth, or typically is for the most part. So, but a headlamp, good idea if you're out after dark. Another question was also about the run, and it asked about aid stations and how often they are and what product that they'll have. Aid stations are very typically about a mile apart in your Ironman races. On this course, slightly different, and that's predicated by the course and the trail and where they can get aid stations on and off. So approximately every mile, and it's really a smorgasbord. You're always going to have water. The fluid replacement drink, or excuse me, the electrolyte carbohydrate drink is typically is Gatorade Endurance. The flavors we'll know. They don't always. You might want to check the website, but we'll know at the expos what flavors. Usually we have orange on bike and lemon lime on run, or vice versa. Typically we'll always have cola if you need to go the sugar and the caffeine route. It's there. Cliff Bar products, which is going to be shots, shot blocks, shot gels, mini bars, and then it's chips and pretzels and the whole array, and then they'll have chicken broth after dark when it gets cold. So and that's pretty standard. I'll go over that at the race briefings at the race all week, and we can define that and answer more questions as we get closer. In case sometimes there's changes with that and they add different products and move it around. But those are good questions. As far as product on the course and training, and the headlamp is a good one. That's a really good question. So you want to plan ahead, so you're not chasing your tail the day before the race around town looking for a headlamp. So that's what I have for you right now. Again, post up questions as you find them, and we can continue to address that stuff as it gets closer. Keep cracking away at your training, build it up slowly, be consistent, and stay safe. Big thing, stay healthy. All right, stay healthy and enjoy your training. We'll see you next week. Take care.